Welcome to pop.0 with Brian Chaffin and John Keat.
All right, take three.
Welcome to pop.0 with John Keat and Brian Chaffin, blah, blah, blah. We're going to talk about some stuff. Hi, John.
Hey, Brian, how's it going?
It goes, brother.
Good.
Good to see you. You know, it's interesting. You are bombastic. You can be bombastic. You can be cranky. You can be prickly. No, prickly's not. That's not fair at all. Yet you have this heart of poetry within you too.
Oh,
And you have this artistic side. Like some of the every once in a while you'll reveal something to me that touches you or that means something to you, and it's often in contrast with your
my medical
sharper
checkups and problems.
What's that?
My medical ailments and problems and ointments I need to use. Those very touching moments.
Yeah, exactly.
Is it supposed to do that discharge, Brian? Do you know?
That's just not right. That's just not right.
I had to put an end to that. You kidding me? Anyway, what are we gonna bullshit about today?
Today, well, I don't know. You have some Mac Pro thoughts on your head. I know you want to rant about the Mac Pro and Apple's terrible stewardship of its professional line.
You act as if you disagree. There. All comfortable in your kettle. Talking about my pot.
In my kettle.
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant. Yeah.
So, yeah, you know, I'm a big frequenter of the Mac Rumors forum, particularly the Mac Pro subgroup there, which is probably one of the best concentrations of pro Mac users and a kind of wide. It's about as big a group of that as I know, without getting into like real industry specific stuff. But go ahead.
I got to quibble because yeah, there's a lot of pro users there, but there's still pro users who are self-selected towards the echo chamber. Right. Well, so there are a lot of pro users who could not care less about hanging out in forums.
Well, you know, this brings up an interesting question of, and this has been raging debate in that sub forum for a long time as to what constitutes a pro, right? Because by some of the apologist standards, the only pros that exist are basically Pixar, who has a back room of, you know, render farm equipment, and the current, you know, trash can. Well, current. There's stretching a word beyond its breaking point. The trash can Mac Pro is fine for them because they don't really need a storage device. They're all network storage. They don't really need a lot of GPU and CPU power because a lot of that is on the back end. So that is a pro. But, you know, professional was never so narrow in Apple's history. It was always a lot of independent users. The folks,
yeah, a lot of artists, a lot of designers, a lot of video professionals in particular.
IT tinkerers,
a lot of graphic design professionals.
A lot of IT tinkerers. A lot of enthusiasts that are just into the technology because they like technology stuff. And
I actually think that it's a vibrant community. I'm not in any way, I'm not trying to downplay that community. I'm not trying to denigrate that community. I'm not trying to dismiss that community. But I think that is self-selecting more towards really involved enthusiasts and nerds like us than it is towards you know, graphic artists that are working for you know, advertising agencies and that sort of thing.
You might be surprised that, I mean, there are folks in there that are buying hundreds of thousands of dollars of equipment a year for their companies. A lot of HP Z stations now and box with
are those people end users, or are those people support people?
They are end users and in some case proprietors of the businesses. So
Okay.
it's a bit. What your point is well taken, right? Anytime there's a self-selecting group, there's going to be self-selected bias, but the group is a bit more broad than you would think. And I've been a member of that forum for a long enough time to remember when that forum was completely what people would call, the center of the universe for Kool-Aid in the Mac community. So it's not like it's been traditionally a gripe session locale. It's been traditionally a place where you go to really just bathe in the glory of Apple and Kool-Aid, and that's. And anyway, watching that forum over time, over the years, and particularly in the last couple of weeks, there are a few threads on there that are so horrendously negative, and not negative in people, oh, let me bash Apple. They've given up on bashing Apple is the sad thing. They're just leaving. And so a lot of them are asking questions of where are you going now that, Apple doesn't have a machine for you and support you. And the interesting insight for me there was how fragile the Apple ecosystem is for the professionals and how fast it unwinds. I'm going to liken it a bit to something I learned here in New York City during the last blackout. I used to mock television. I'm like, you have a zombie apocalypse or whatever, some tragedy, and humanity goes out the window in like a day. Everyone is running with their hair on fire. Society breaks down. I'm like, give it a couple of days, I used to think. But sadly, life imitates art in spooky ways I wouldn't have fathomed, because within a day of the last blackout here, there was chaos. There was lines. There were people stabbing people for gas online. It was bizarre how fast things can come crashing down. And that is what was interesting in the thread. So not only are folks ditching the Mac because they just don't have the tools, they're going again for those HPZ workstations and the box with BOXX stations. Some of these machines have with the current Xeon Tech 44 cores, crazy power compared to what we're stuck with on the Mac side. But a bunch of them, they're like, I'm out. They're like, yeah, I'm not getting an iPhone now. There's no point. And they're like, yeah, I'm going to get a Surface Pro instead of an iPad. There's no point. So you would think, so the ecosystem works differently to retard migration than we would have thought, at least for those pro users. It's not something that keeps clawing at them and pulling them back in. It's something that let them put up with more garbage than they really wanted to for years and years of not getting a refresh. But once they pulled the plug on them that they weren't getting a Mac, it just came down like a deck of cards quick for a lot of those users. They're like, screw it, I'm out. If I'm out, I'm out. And they dumped everything. So this could be a very scary canary in the coal mine for Apple. I don't know if the average consumer will follow suit in the same way, in that the ecosystem may be a bit more sticky for them. But if those users are still as influential as they were during the 96, 97 period where Apple almost died, and that helped build the halo effect around Apple to get more and more people in, if those same users are as influential in getting consumers to pull out, yeah, this deck of cards could fall fast, much faster than I would have ever suspected would be the case. I thought the ecosystem would keep people sticky, at least around the iOS devices. But it may not be so. And that's just something I never thought of, and I never thought would be an issue. I thought that they're so bifurcated and the ecosystem is so strong on the iOS side that the Mac would not be an issue. Apple may be making a very critical mistake in downplaying the Mac's importance, even though monetarily it might not be a great pull. Strategically, it may be a bigger deal than anyone is really suspecting. And if these early folks that are bailing on the Mac are an indication, it's something to be afraid of.
Well, you and I have long argued that the Mac Pros and the people that use them are important from the halo standpoint. From the I mean, the one of the biggest things for me, for instance, is the fact that Apple doesn't pay for all that product placement on TV shows and movies. It's not advertising. Microsoft has to buy that stuff. Apple has never had to buy it. As a matter of fact, they often don't loan anything out. There definitely is some material, some product that is loaned out to Hollywood, but by and large, Apple isn't even loaning stuff out to Hollywood for them to use it for props in their TV shows and movies. And one reason that happens is because, of course, today in particular, Hollywood wants people to be using pretty stuff. So like you'll oftentimes
You mean like the excuse me. You mean like the very pretty LG monitors that Apple's pushing? Those beautiful pieces of art?
Exactly. A lot of times Hollywood wants the good guys using Macs and the bad guys using ugly PCs. But part of that is the beauty of the hardware for sure. But it didn't always used to be the beauty of the hardware, because once upon a time, hardware wasn't beautiful. It was just, there was some that was less ugly than others. And a big part of that has been the fact that the people who were making these shows were Mac users. And not only do they know Macs, but they wanted to show Macs because, you know, Apple was the underdog. They were rooting for the underdog just as much as we were. And so they wanted to feature Macs. Plus they knew them. So if these people stop, if that particular class of professional users stops using Macs, there will be fewer Macs in TV shows and movies. And Apple has essentially gotten, you know, billions worth of free advertising for the last 2.5 decades from this sort of thing. And that will have an impact. It may be hard to measure and quantify, but that will have an impact. So that's one area. Same thing with music producers. If there is a documentary about a band that's recording something in a studio, 95 out of 100 of those, 19 out of 20 of those is going to end up featuring Macs somewhere in the background in the studio.
So to your point, it's interesting. One of the big, strong bastions and holdouts in the pro user forums that I'm seeing are some of the Logic users, and you know, some of them are forcing themselves to go back to Pro Tools just because it's cross-platform, and they're fearing, you know, eventually they have to go. All those users are holding on to cheese grater Macs like it was life dependent on it. For whatever reason, the trash can Mac, the real time latency isn't as good for them apparently on those units as some of the cheese grater machines were.
That industry, along with video users, pro video users, they still use a lot of PCI cards.
Very interesting on that. And the video users, a lot of them are they just don't trust Apple to maintain, even though Final Cut Pro is kind of coming back to, you know, before they pulled the plug on version 7. They just don't trust Apple, and who could blame them? I mean, Apple just, they killed Aperture, they kill all these devices, they don't pay attention to the pro market, and if your livelihood depends on that, I mean, even by Apple standards, it's gotten ridiculous, right? Apple's, you know, who pulled the Xserves and RAIDs and had 15 false starts and stops into enterprise. Even by that totally schizoid standard of ridiculousness by Apple, today it's orders of magnitude worse. So they're just right now, it seems, at least from the tenor in those forums that I follow, that the sound is probably the one that's, the group of sound users are probably the ones that are clawing hardest still, but even they're being eroded and looking for ways out.
Yeah. And if they switch to Windows,
they are. It's not if, they have been.
Okay, they have it. Yeah, okay, well, keep in mind that Logic is not and has never been that much of a studio
software.
studio has been dominated. Recording studios, professional recording studios, have been dominated by Pro Tools. There's a lot of stuff that Logic is great at. I'm a huge Logic fan, and have been delighted to see Logic getting love from Apple in the last year. Right? I mean, there's actually been a couple of significant updates to Logic in the last year.
Not that any normal human being would know what they are.
Well, but
again,
we're talking about pros.
Yeah, but you're a beaten housewife here again, in that they released that point update. What was it, 10.3 or whatever it was, with a
10.2 and 10.3,
with a few interesting new features that they didn't articulate at all. Big difference is Steve Jobs. So I guess yes, it is good that at least they put out a press release to let you know, hey, we bothered to update this. Kudos for doing what you're supposed to. I don't know why they deserve a cookie for that.
We're talking about keeping pro users happy here, and the PR and Apple releasing a press release for a point update, which is still ridiculous, is not the point. Professionals aren't know what's in Logic and what isn't.
Even professionals, even Steve Jobs would demo parts of Final Cut when they came out, and what he would do is it stokes the imagination of not just the professionals, but the wannabe professionals by saying, here's the magic you can do, and communicating that. The fact that they didn't forget, they don't have a Steve Jobs, I get that. That's not their fault. It's a very tough thing to do. The fact that they didn't put out a video and saying, hey, here's how this new feature works, and it's super easy, and just doing a screencast that would take all of a minute, to show a couple of the features, is again them missing the plot. They're just not doing remedial stuff to get anyone excited about that. And what continues to be the and it does nothing to stem this overarching feeling that they're abandoning pros by doing just a little bit more there. They could have done a lot to help it, but it just goes. So now it's left to pros. You know what? You're big boys and girls. You can figure this out yourself. Here, you peasants. Here's a couple of new features. Let's see what you can do with that. You could thank us for it. It's not a way to message that community, to show so little regard and excitement for it, in my opinion.
Yeah. All right. Fair enough. No, I'm not going to argue with any of that. Apple. We have like 16 threads here going in this conversation. Let me close. Let me close
and
out
that's different from all of our other conversations.
Right. Let me close out the recording part of this thread first. Pop music has a huge influence on culture, and the people that make pop music have an outsized influence on culture. That's at least as big as Hollywood's influence on culture. And when musicians and producers are using Macs, there are people in the populace who notice. Certainly people want to be musicians notice. And if those people switch to Windows, and I realize that some have already started, but if they all switch to Windows, or if most of them switch to Windows, or even a sizable percentage of them switch to Windows, Apple is going to be losing part of this cultural tour de force that they've had helping them on the Mac for years, for decades. And that would be a huge problem. And to that end, John, and I know that you and I completely agree on this, but to that end, Apple should invest some of the money that it has, because it turns out Apple's got a ton of money, and Apple should invest that in making the pro market as good as it can be, whether or not it makes a direct profit.
I'm almost of the opinion that Apple should stop and quote investing money anywhere, because all its investments are wastes of money, as far as I can tell at this point. Apple's gone from spending 1/4 the budget of R&D of IBM's R&D budget to doing 2x that. When it was spending 1/4 with Steve Jobs, it was producing more product, more innovations, and more leapfrog products than it ever was. And now it's been spending 2x, and it's producing less even iterative products than it ever has. I just feel like everything they're doing is waste of money, because ultimately the company is run by 5 guys at the top, and everything is choked through there, and nothing is getting the attention because they're off to either figuring out what new color wrist straps are really cool, or and iterating, you know, the Apple Watch every year, because that's really critical for us to get updates to a watch every year, but not the Macs. So their focus is bad, strategically bad. A lot of people have, you know, as of late, I hear criticisms that Tim Cook is off on these political tangents that are taking his attention away. And I listened to, by the way, your conversation was a very good one. You had it on a couple of different podcasts, and I shockingly agree with you that a lot of these issues are baloney. Yes, he has you know, a personal interest in kind of the gay and lesbian community, which frankly, whatever, it's fine. And it's relatively speaking noise with regard to Apple strategic decisions, but all the other political issues, like anybody that was at the helm of Apple would have dealt with. What, when the FBI came knocking, it would have been less political with Steve Jobs there? No. When the tax issues crop up, or
Steve Jobs would have been much more obnoxious about the.
They would have told them go fuck themselves, and that would have been the end of it. Fuck you. And by the way, like, Steve Jobs wasn't invited to Obama's White House and told Obama to go fuck himself because production was never going to come back to America. So the difference is you just took it differently when Steve Jobs was involved in it. It's all stuff that comes to the fore. So I have no problem with the politics of that. That's a red herring and just noise to distract the reality. My problem with Tim Cook is quite horrible mismanagement of Apple's focus. The company has not been updating Macs, period. That's a mistake. The software has gone to crap. We haven't had a reasonable update, any meaningful updates of iWorks, and it's such a joke. I don't even, it disgusts me to talk about it. So just doing iterative basic stuff of just refreshes, and this notion, you know, it's funny, we got a refresh of the MacBook Pro on the consumer side, and arguably, and that's sadly the more frequently updated stuff on the Mac, right? And the processor in my 2011 MacBook Pro is pretty much on par with the processor in the current 2016 MacBook Pro refresh, because Intel sucks and they haven't really been iterating their chips in any meaningful way performance-wise. Maybe on the battery side there's been some improvements, but it's been mediocre. But this notion of, oh, well, there's no point to update the Mac Pro is such a ludicrous pile of shit. It's shocking to the conscience. Since the 2013 update, we've gone from a 12-core processor to 22-core, and that's by the current version. The next version is going to be even better. So the leaps on the Pro side in performance have been staggering relative to the consumer side. Yet this bullshit meme.
HP 22.
What?
To wit, the HPZ series.
Yeah, they have 22, 36, and I think even maybe 44 core machines now. So this notion that, oh, well, there's no reason to update the Mac Pro because nothing's been happening on the Intel side is a total deceitful scumbag pundit fuckwad line of bullshit that's somehow sold through the entire punditry of tech as if it were true. It's ridiculous. It's fucking ludicrous. But yet everyone just did nod their heads to it.
Who is actually defending Apple at this point? I see Apple fanboys defending Apple on this and arguing that Apple hasn't needed to update the Mac Pro, but everyone else is piling on Apple.
You know what? The punditry makes me sick in the tech world, because now that it's become in vogue in the last, say 7-8 months, they've jumped on this. But when I was bitching about this a year ago or more, everyone was like, there's no need. There was just excuse upon excuse for retardation on that. There's still excuses made now for the screens. You know, oh, Apple. Listen, Mac Observer, as far as I'm concerned, is guilty of sin on this too. The notion of, Oh, well, there's no reason for Apple to make its own Wi-Fi stations because the third parties have done everything there is to do with that mesh bullshit. First of all, what a crock of shit that is. Because, yeah, there's nothing I want more than my mesh, all my Wi-Fi traffic to be going through a cloud service that has my ability to log into my router and monitor all my traffic. That's fantastic. There's nothing because, you know, no one will ever hack those things and get all that information out. That's going to be perfectly secure like everything fucking else is in the cloud. What a fucking joke that is. Secondly, to look at tech like the Wi-Fi router and think, yeah, mesh is about as far as it can go. There's nothing else to do. There's no home automation integration we can do. There's no artificial intelligence assistance we can throw in there. There's no ability to throw in a Synology like personal network box in there. There's no ability to do media management that we might want to throw in there. Nah, fuck that. There's nothing else that can be done with that box. So fuck it. Let's just give up. If that is the actual mentality at Apple, fuck them all to death, because it's ridiculous giving up on any intellectual curiosity, any passion for advancing the art in any way. It's pathetic. And the whole punditry is just nodding their heads like fucking retard ditto heads. Yeah, there's really nothing else for Apple to add to Wi-Fi. Fuck you, you dumb fucks. Of course there's a ton of shit you could add to that Wi-Fi and the routers. It's ridiculous to suggest otherwise. And all it shows is a total lack of fucking ambition and vision by every douchebag pundit that says that. So fuck them all is my opinion on that, in that regard. So there's plenty of horseshit I can pile. That's just one topic on the punditry. We need a whole new show. Actually, we need a fucking mini series of shows for me to shit on them all properly for the fucking lack of vision and the stupid shit the fucking pundits constantly say. And then they 2 weeks later, when they're proven wrong about something, they act like, oh, that was always my opinion. Let them go fuck themselves. That's my opinion on that.
How do you feel about that, John?
Yeah, fuck them all. That's how I feel about that.
It's a bit unclear there. I'm not quite catching what you're laying down.
So before I went on that fucking rant, what the hell were we talking about?
We're talking about the fact that Apple needs to put money in its Pro line. It needs its Pro hardware and it needs its Pro software, whether or not it makes any money.
So we were disagreeing a bit in that I think almost every extra dollar Apple spends is a waste of money at this point because they're so lacking focus.
That is yet another
tangent. The spirit of what you're saying, I agree with. They really need to start paying attention to it. Whether that's, I don't know if I need their money as much as I just need their fucking, to take the fucking dog nose and shove it in the fucking pile of shit to say, hey, this shit can't stand. You can't keep shitting all over the place. Do something good, you dumb fucking dog, and produce something reasonable in this area. Like fucking refresh your motherfucking Macs every motherfucking year. If you don't, you should all be fucking beaten. There is never a fucking reason that any single fucking Mac is not motherfucking updated every motherfucking year. Period.
I agree.
Fuck, I hate it when we agree on shit.
And the same thing with the software too. All right, well, I do have a little bit of pushback.
All right, hit me.
Just the tiniest amount of pushback. There are two things you mentioned quite a while ago. We have, like, again, I think we're up to like 18 threads now. One of them is that pros are abandoning, like once they leave their Mac Pros, they're just like, you know, like screw it, screw iPhone, screw iPad, screw it all. My bias here is that Android still sucks.
Dude, again, I need a fucking mini series to count the ways that fucking Android sucks. Yes, I agree.
And even if pros are saying right now, because I abandoned the Mac Pro, because I left my Mac Pro behind, I'm not going to get an iPhone and iPad. They might be saying that now. Kind of, it's very difficult for me to imagine they're really going to be happy in the Android space.
So let me shelve the phone side of that equation because it's hard to disagree with what is just the pure truth. Android is a pile of shit, and not necessarily from its feature and function or even form that it takes, which I have issues with too. But again, by the way, here's another area where the punditry, you've got to be executing these motherfucking cunts that purport to be fucking pundits is too good for these fucking retards, for all the chaos these assholes are causing, because they try to portray iPhone and Android, as if they're fucking different lifestyle choices or something like that. The retarded basic principle of shit security on Android is so overlooked. Just for one easy point, almost every phone you get is not going to be updated on the Android side. And there are 0-day security flaws that people are like, meh, just live with it. So what if I get a text that nukes my entire phone or just roots everything and takes all my information? So what? And that doesn't exist on the iPhone, because I mean, they keep updating for 2-3 years. And I'm not just talking about maybe you get 2 patches lifetime, like the Nexus phones that I've owned. All right, I've gotten like 3 or 4 updates, and then they're like, well, that phone's end of life, so go fuck yourself. So you even on the most supported phones, like the Nexus line, maybe they'll do better with the Pixel, but it's hard to imagine them doing worse. You'll get a few updates, but that doesn't speak to the vast majority of Android owners. So yeah, I mean, it's such a freak show of being sold a bill of goods, of the emperor having no clothes, and add in 1,000 other cliches of the horseshit that the punditry sells you on Android, that it shocks the conscience. If there was malpractice for being a pundit, the vast majority of pundits should be fucking, you know, skewered with hot prods for their bad malpractice in that. But let's set aside the phone issue for a second. I totally find reasonable for creatives to look at a Surface tablet that doubles as a pretty decent laptop and a pretty shitty tablet, but a serviceable enough tablet, for them to look at that for creative purposes and say, yeah, that actually works for me. That is a very easily plausible thing to believe. And in fact, you see some portion of those creatives that are leaving the Mac going that route for the tablet side, the tablet/laptop side. Then they're going to Big Iron, obviously, for whatever their heavy lifting is on the desktop. And on the phone, you know, even if they hold on to the iPhone at that point, it's almost vestigial, right? It's not like they're in the ecosystem. Like, they don't really give a shit about the ecosystem. They're just like, yeah, I might use this because it's more secure, but not because I'm buying into this anymore. And a bunch of people have been sold by the punditry that, yeah, Android is just as good, you know. And at a certain point, maybe you're throwing up your hands and you don't give a fuck. So some portion of those people are going to go to Android. You know, what portion, I don't know. But I hear you, you know, but part of that may be your bias and mine, Brian. We're the only two idiots that look at this issue and we're like, is everyone else fucking high? Are they fucking high? Even if you think that it works just as good or even better, like on the feature side and whatnot, that the fucking issue of the phones not being updated in any real way to the massive security flaws that exist there, it would be malpractice in any other fucking industry to just say, oh, it's
you know,
shit.
John, Tim Cook has said, he hasn't said it in about a year, but he has said on multiple occasions that privacy and security will become a selling point at some point. And I think that when it comes to Android and security in particular, that the real issue is that we haven't had the kind of high profile, massive data problems that bring that issue home to roost.
We disagree. Android had a 0-day where just sending a text will root the whole goddamn phone. You know, I'm not sure how much worse it needs to get to that. What does the phone have to grow legs and crawl up your ass and ass rape you before, you know? Because barring that, I'm not sure how much more
problems with that, John. That's what I'm saying is I'm not talking about I'm not saying that there haven't been any problems with Android. What I'm saying is that there hasn't been something that's wide scale enough that is, I mean, like Apple, rightly or wrongly, Apple got more crap from people social engineer hacking of iCloud passwords than Android has ever gotten for its lack of system-wide security.
Yeah, but that's a bunch of chickens, you know, cowling about and the public not really reacting to it. The press, you know, masturbates itself so much as to its importance that it thinks that when it throws a hissy fit that the general public gives a flying shit. They don't. The fact that there was break-in to a bunch of self-entitled, probably self-promoting celebrities of their nudie pics, while titillating for TMZ to show about, didn't change consumer behavior one fucking bit. And sadly, the fact that there was a 0-day hack on the Android side also didn't change consumer behavior, but they didn't give a fuck.
Consumers, I meet consumers who talk about iCloud being hacked.
They're somewhat of a self-selecting group again. If we're going to go by our bias of self-selection and the people that you meet, that has a little to do with it.
No, listen to me. I'm telling you that I've met normal people who have talked to me about iCloud being hacked. I'm not talking about our readers. I'm not talking about our listeners. I'm talking about people that I've met in the real world who their understanding is that iCloud was hacked, and it wasn't. And my point there is that if and when Android has some kind of high profile mass issue with security and or privacy, then Tim Cook's point about it being a selling point, being important to consumers, may actually become true. Right now, it's not true.
I understand your point. I don't think it's an unreasonable point. I disagree with it, because already the crazy stuff that's happened on Android hasn't changed behavior. And although those users came to you with concern that iCloud may have been hacked, I don't think it actually changed their behavior at all. And I think there's going to be some group of people that care. You and I care because we're idiots. And there's probably a non-idiot group that also cares and is somewhat motivated by that. But I think by and large, just it's noise to the most of the public, and they don't give a shit. And I don't think it's going to be a distinguishing factor. I personally like Apple for it. I personally, there are things I would use Apple services for, and I think you and I are sadly in agreement on this too, that I wouldn't use for anything. I'm not going to have Alexa in my fucking house. Alexa can go fuck itself. Not to mention I have issues with the company in a broader sense, but I don't trust them worth a crap. And if I were to ever trust anyone with that kind of thing, it would only be Apple, because they're the only ones that showed any balls. Like when you have the American federal government coming up to you and saying, you're going to give me this shit, and there are people almost with pitchforks in the street demanding that you give a backdoor to for the FBI terrorist thing, and you stand up to that, people can agree and disagree, and I think reasonable people can agree and disagree on that. But one thing it's hard to disagree with on, it showed a brass set of fucking balls to stand up to that kind of pressure, and they're probably the only ones that have. So that's the only company I would ever get trust with that kind of private information. It's the only reason I wear this otherwise useless piece of shit watch that is tracking information that I'm sure every institution, from insurance companies to otherwise, would love to have, just basically to try to fuck me a little bit more finely than they did before, because I think they would actually keep this private, where you think an Android, the Android data is being pumped straight to like some advertising click engine as it comes streaming off your wrist, is my suspicion. But anyway, we are probably in relative vehement agreement there, but other than, I don't think it actually will matter. But you may be right. I mean, like I said, I don't think your position is unreasonable there. Just we disagree on it.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right. Well, we had 3 topics, and we have now spent about one of them.
What were the other 2?
What were the other 2? I sent you notes.
Yeah, you're like a diligent, organized person, and I'm just
Can you please? I would like you to. Can you say that one more time, please?
You are a diligent and organized person. Let me give it the
are
big
you
caveat with relative to me. I am pretty sure I am the Oscar of this odd couple.
Are you referring to me, Brian Chaffin, and you're calling me diligent and organized? Is that what you said, John?
Relative to me, yes, that is correct.
At 12:14 Pacific on February 23rd. Is that what I'm hearing? I just want to make sure I heard that.
That is right.
And I want to make sure that anybody listening to this heard that as well, because sometimes it's possible there may have been some questions about my relative organizational skills.
So I found Duly noted. I found your notes, and because of your diligence, I remember the other two. So one, the other two topics are kind of technology being ruined through success of the technology, and Oak Island. So these are going to be relatively quick. So I noticed this, like, you have to be an old fart like myself to remember when I was a kid and you used to get phone calls. You were kind of excited to get phone calls because it could be someone cool and awesome that's calling you, because people still use the phone just to say hi, just to, you know, communicate about good stuff. And it was kind of like the early days of email, you know, the old AOL, you got mail, and people were excited because it was so novel. And usually there was something good and happy that was coming in through the email channel. So you were jazzed about it. And then as it became successful and adopted, and you just got, you know, horrible business crap through your email that you have to deal with, that nobody wants to deal with. And there's, you know, CYA bullshit in there and all that kind of stuff. And even today, like every time the phone rings, I can't stand it, because it's probably like bad news or some marketer or some crap I don't want to deal with on the other line of that every time I hear it, it's like it's like being prodded a little bit with an electric cow prod. Then I'm like, oh shit, it's almost certainly bad news. And what's interesting is almost everything that was once awesome and magical before it was taken mainstream and made successful just turned to shit through its success. And email and you know, right now messaging is kind of okay because it's still not mostly used by business, but as that gets more successful, you wonder, like, that's going to be another avenue of being prodded to the point where all these notifications, like a notification was cool when it was a notification of like, hey, your bubblegum candy awesome issue new toy came in or something like that. The notifications now are just more shit I don't want to deal with. So the notion that I have this strapped to my watch and a watch strapped to me, and I want one more fucking thing buzzing me like a Jack Russell fucking terrier jumping in my motherfucking face, demanding my attention, makes me want to kill myself. So I have zero notifications on everything.
Stop. You're using notifications wrong, man. You're using notifications wrong.
Please, you can tell me about your curated garden of notifications and how awesome it is.
Yes, my curated garden of notifications. One of the primary reasons why I like my Apple Watch.
Dude, I don't want to get a call from anyone anymore. Do you understand? Like, no fucking phone calls. Every fucking ring of it makes me sick. So if the phone call is that bad, I guarantee you getting an email or a text message, fucking notification, even curated to this one person or not, I don't want it. It's all bad news. It's just like one more cattle prod thing.
You might have the surprising heart of a poet, but you're still a fucking freak, dude. So, you know, like,
it's true. I may be a demographic of one, so I freely cop to that.
Demographic of one. So
I freely cop that. But my point is, my point is somewhat broader than one with regard to, I don't think I'm alone in that the phone has gotten spoiled over time. Like, a lot of people are just sending stuff to voicemail. Well, they don't ever want to hear anything.
That's the thing I wanted to talk about here. I wanted to talk about the reality, and this is going to be one of those things, I think, where there's an age gap between, say, millennials and us, and between us and the generation before us. How much of what you're talking about is, because I gotta back up, because you prefaced your setup with, at least when you and I were talking before the show, that when you were young, you look forward to the phone call, and, you know, oh my goodness, who is that? It's a special event. My phone's ringing.
It's grandma, happening. Right? Or it's someone awesome.
And now people are in such constant and immediate contact, and we have I personally have my phone with me at all times. I don't turn my ringer off at night.
You're a crazy person.
Yeah,
I don't remember last time my ringer even was on. I think I got the phone, instantly turned it off, and it hasn't been on since.
I turn my ringers off when I record events like this. And so how much of what you're talking about is merely the fact that the way we are consuming technology today makes it so persistent, so omnipresent, that it's become burdensome. as opposed to enlightening.
And I think that's a factor. But, you know, I have a greater analogy to it, and it's nothing can spoil something you love so much as it becoming your occupation and it becoming necessary for your living, right? And there's no bit greater like people who, you know, say they want to, they're lucky enough to do what they love. That's great if you're otherwise well enough off that you can feed your family and stuff, and despite how well you do at what you love. But when you need to make the money flow in every week or month or whatever it is to keep everyone paid and have a roof over your head, it tends to spoil almost anything you love. And I think the greatest example of that is sex. Most of us really like sex. But yet, the oldest occupation on earth, a lot of the prostitutes that have that, you know, they don't feel the same way about it probably that they might have had it not been their occupation. So there's something that happens as the technology goes from examples and uses of delight and infrequency to where it becomes necessary for enterprise to work on, right? Email before it went big league was, you've got mail. Hey, somebody, pen pal, whatever, sent me a cool note about what's going on in their little corner of the universe. And that was delightful. And now I get, even beyond the spam or whatever, it's just endless mire of crap is the vast majority of the use, right? So it gets usurped from the wonderful potentials to the dreary drudgery of reality. I think we're saying a lot of the same thing, but I thought it was kind of interesting. Like, I don't want to hear my phone anymore. I don't want to hear anything that fucking rings at this point. I just want to fucking Elvis it over and over again.
Have you considered looking for a ringtone that you enjoy hearing?
I've done that, and I literally got rid of my last phone just to get a phone with a better ringtone to it, and now I hate that ringtone too. And I loved it when it started.
You're talking about your home phone?
Yes. Okay. And it doesn't matter what I pick on my iPhone. If it rings, I fucking hate it. You could take my favorite song, and if you make that the fucking ringtone, I'm gonna fucking pull out my Elvis gun, just shoot the motherfucker dead. It's a great way to spoil something. It's to make it the ringtone. Anyway, I've got like 7 minutes before I got to get on another call. Oak Island.
Season finale was this week, so we're gonna have some spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers. True. If you haven't seen it, by all means, skip this part. This is your chance. So, I think, you know what I'm learning. I try to get several people into Oak Island, and I think it's very polarizing. Like, for some people, it's just too slow, tedious, with not enough reward, which I totally understand, because this show is the biggest cock tease on fucking television, as far as I'm concerned. It's like, there's gold next week for sure that we're gonna find, and you know, it's here's another plank of wood that they find. And this week we're really thrilled because instead of a plank of wood, we found a piece of metal, a hunk of metal. Awesome.
Okay, and lots of wood and different kinds of wood.
Yes, I mean, there was so much wood that I had wood. So excuse me. But yeah, this was the interesting insight in that one of the reasons I like it is that this show in some ways has done more for mystery and for kind of police detective type work than every CSI show in the history of mankind put together. Because they, you know, when they find like something that might be Spanishish in the swamp, and a plank of wood. But wait, before we get to the detail, I'm just saying they find all these different things, and it's tedious because it takes weeks to connect one dot to another. Then they get an expert in that gives them more confidence in one aspect of all these little menagerie of clues that now sheds new light on the other things. And it's really solving a genuine mystery, like real roll up your sleeves, or more real than you've ever seen in any bullshit detective show of how it is. And it's unsatisfying for long periods of time. And then there's very small light bulbs, and and you don't notice how much of the strategy has shifted because of the little insights that you have over time. But I really like that because it's very genuine, and if you appreciate kind of what they're building, at least metaphorically, there,
well, stop.
it's
Okay,
kind of
stop
cool
right
to
there.
me.
Stop. Because we got to tell people what the show actually is in very brief terms. It's called The Curse of Oak Island, and it's following Rick and Marty Lagina, who are two. I think they made their money in oil. Who are putting money from both investors and their own, and obviously revenue from the TV show, into excavating a centuries-old mystery over what might have been buried on Oak Island, which is an island off of Nova Scotia up in Canada.
It is a real live treasure island hunt.
Right. It's a reality show.
Yeah.
It's a reality show, and it is you should look it up if you have any interest in this. You should look it up because we couldn't possibly go into all the nuances here. But they're digging hundreds of feet beneath this island, looking for something that may have been buried. And
could be ancient gold treasure, could be the Holy Grail, could be the
Ark of the Covenant.
Ark,
that's my favorite one.
The Ark of the Covenant. There's a lot of theories as to what could be here. The only thing that's pretty clear and pretty factual is they dig and they keep finding bizarre structures over 100 feet deep of passageways and woodwork and weird stuff that just shouldn't be in some middle of an island in the middle of Nova Scotia, Canada.
Could be the product of previous digs.
Yes,
that's the thing.
Yes,
that's the thing. And in the season finale, they found a lot of wood. They found, including some wood that is old. They had some test results for some of the wood they found dates back to the 17th century. They found metal. That metal. What did you make of that metal? That bracket, that corner bracket.
The bracket was easier to make of than the thin stuff that seems to have been kind of like a roof shielding to, I guess, prevent. I don't know what it was supposed to, what its purpose was, but there was like a thin, almost, thin, tinny looking shielding that apparently was encountered by previous treasure hunters that they couldn't dig through, and they bust through it with this big mechanical clamp device that they've brought in and ripped through it. And I'm not sure what that is there for. Maybe it was a shielding for a cavity. But the hinge, they got that expert that said that it was really a bracket, a thick bracket, the kind that would be found on a treasure chest. And so everyone's heads almost exploded when she said that. And she's like, no, this is seriously the kind of stuff that would be on a treasure chest. It's ornamental. It's not structural to a treasure chest. And she had a really cool insight. She says, I don't think you found it because there was a treasure chest there. What's likely, they've taken so many materials and they probably repurposed them as they were building these passageways and structures underneath the earth. And they probably repurposed this hinge for something. But nonetheless, that there's even a part of a treasure chest that folks are finding has got to get everyone pretty excited. And the other thing that was weird to me was I was surprised that it was steel and not rusted iron, right? Because back in that day, producing steel was not quite as easy as it is today. So anything made of steel is kind of a little bit more exotic.
But see, that could also be the product of a later search.
It could be, and it's going to be very tough because I don't think you can like carbon date mineralogy or something like that. But maybe you can. I don't know.
I think that the notched wood and the wood with pine resin on it was a lot more interesting than that steel. I suspect that I really suspect that steel is going to prove to be
more modern.
Something. Something involved in a previous treasure hunt.
Interesting. So this is my anyway. It was a great season end. If you're okay with kind of the slow build up of a genuine, treasure hunt, it was about as good an ending, minus finding the gold, which realistically we're going to hear about in the news before we hear about it on the show. But one of the things that I thought was a little bit cheesy was this this notion, like, would they only do 2 hole digs this season, and they were running out of money, and oh my gosh, they're going to do a 3rd and a 4th hole, and I'm like, that is baloney. You know, it's clear the producers
Yeah, I think
that, because they're going to keep
more of that than there is, John.
Yeah, they're going to keep Swiss cheesing that entire area until they get some kind of confirmation.
But I think that you're making more of that than there is.
What's there? It's a show. I can make anything I want out of it. What?
No,
what's wrong with criticizing that?
Well, I imagine that what we were presented with was their actual decision-making process.
Yeah, we disagree about that. I think what is potentially confusing there, or where we might disagree with and agree on part, which was when I forget each of their names, when the younger brother was telling the older brother, look, Mark, you need to pick this hole. Everyone's picked a hole than you, and you've sacrificed so much to do this, and it's been your dream. You deserve to pick one of the treasure spots. And his older brother, you know, they kind of teared up and almost cried. And you know, whenever you get you're someone that you loved, you know, actually verbalizing how much they appreciate you, and it's liable to choke someone up. So I believe that was totally genuine. I don't think that was manufactured for the camera, or they need to go into acting if that's the case.
That's predicated on the idea that that was the last hole they get to dig this year.
No, I think that, well, I don't think your point is unreasonable.
Don't get me wrong. These producers are expert. I mean, these are the same guys that produce Ancient Alien, for God's sake.
And they,
right? I mean, which, you know, one of my massive guilty pleasures of all time. But I happen to know that you have to be on a phone call right now. So we have been at this for an hour. And I would say that we leave that on a cliffhanger and say thank you for joining us on pop.0.
All right. And on that popular topic, see you next week or something.
Something like that, yeah.